Hello, today I'm going to be teaching you guys how to something that's called fraction busting and decimal busting. So whenever you guys are solving equations and you guys see a bunch of fractions or a bunch of decimals, and let's say you're one that does not like fractions and decimals, I'm going to teach you guys a way on how you can get rid of those fractions and decimals and then just end up with your integers that you guys like working with, okay? So in the equation, x over 2 plus 3 or 3/5 equals 3. Notice how we have some fractions and you're like, I don't really want to work with fractions today. Your first step, if you want to get rid of them, is to look at all of your denominators and then find your least common multiple. So in this case, our denominators are 2 and 5. So if I were to list all the factors of 2 and all the factors of 5, your least common multiple would be the first number that's common between both of them. So in this case would be 10, okay? So whenever you find your least common multiple, that is the number that you are going to be multiplying both sides of to get rid of your fractions. And when you multiply that 10 by both sides, you have to multiply it by the entire thing. So that's why they put parentheses here and 10 on the outside. And then whatever you do to one side, you have to do it to the other side as well. So over here, since you're multiplying this 10 times multiple things on the inside, this is when you'll be doing your distributive property. So if you take 10 times an x over 2, your 10 and 2 goes into both of them, so you can take your 2, cancel it out, become 1, take your 10, cancel it out, and it will become 5. And now you're just left with 5 in the numerator and x in the numerator, so you're going to be left with that 5x there. If you take your 10 times your 3/5, again, 10 is now in your numerator and 5 is in your denominator, so you can cross reduce. 5 will turn into a 1 and 10 will turn into a 2. And then you still have a 3 up here in the numerator, so you'll just take your 2 times your 3 and that will give you a 6. And that's how they got the 6 down here, okay? And then you still had to do it over here on the right side of the equal sign as well. So if you just take your 10 times your 3, that would give you this 30, okay? So all your fractions are gone, and then you just solve your basic two-step equation like normal, okay? So let's do a couple practice problems. So here I have x plus 2/5 equals a negative 1/3. Again, let's say I don't like fractions, so I want to get rid of them. Your first step is to look at your denominators and find your least common multiple. So my least common multiple, again, if I were to list all my factors of 3 and 5, I would have 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, and so on. My 5s would be 5, 10, 15, and so on. And again, your least common multiple is the number that's common between both of them that comes first. So in this case, our least common multiple is 15. So after you find your least common multiple, you can now multiply that least common multiple times both sides. So I'm going to take this negative 1/3 times 15, and I'm going to take this x plus 2/5 times 15. Again, please don't remember you have to multiply it times the entire side over here, okay? Okay, so now you can just simplify it. So over here, when you're taking this 15, you're doing the distributive property. So if 15 times x would give you 15x. Your 15 times 2/5, you can either do this in your calculator or you can cross reduce, which might be a little bit easier. So since 5 goes into 15 3 times, this 5 will turn into a 1, this 15 will turn into a 3. And then you still have a 2 as well in the numerator, so this 3 is in the numerator and this 2 is in the numerator. And again, you're using the distributive property, so you're multiplying. So then you just have to multiply your 3 times 2 to give you 6. Another way that you can do this if you don't want to cross reduce is just multiply your numerators. So like 15 times 2 is 30. And then take that divided by 5 and that will also give you your 6, okay? Alright, and then over here, so we have negative 1/3 times 15. Again, you can cross reduce or you can just multiply. So like 15 times 1 is 15, divided by 3 is 5. And then don't forget that negative. Okay, so the fractions are gone, so we can just solve this like normal. So to get x by itself, I have to move this plus 6. The opposite of adding 6 is subtracting 6. We are now left with 15x equals a negative 11. And then your last step to get x by itself is to divide by that 15 on both sides. And notice how this cannot be reduced, the negative 11 over 15. I don't want you guys to change it to a decimal, just leave it as that fraction. So that would be your answer, x equals negative 11 over 15. Okay, so let's try one more before we move on to decimals. So here we have x plus 2 over 3 equals negative 1 over 21. Again, if you're trying to get rid of the fractions, the first thing that you guys need to do is look at your denominators and find the least common multiple. So again, I already started my threes, my factors of 3 here. So we have 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, and I can keep going. And notice how if I keep going a little bit more, I get 18 and then I get 21. So if I started with my factors of 21, 21 would actually be that first number. So in this case, my least common multiple is going to be that 21. So again, as soon as you find your least common multiple, you're just going to multiply both of your sides by that multiple. Okay, so over here, we're going to do our distributive property. So 21 times x is 21x. 21 times 2/3, again, you can take your 21 times 2 divided by 3, or see if you can cross reduce, which you always will be able to cross reduce if you're taking it times its multiple. So 3 goes into 21 7 times, so I'm going to reduce that 3 to a 1, reduce the 21 to a 7. And then I still have to take it 7 times 2, which is 14. Again, you're more than welcome to use a calculator if you know how to use your fraction key, okay? And then over here on the right side, notice how my 21s are just going to cancel to 1. So if I take negative 1 times this 1 over here, I'm just going to be left with negative 1. Okay, so fractions are gone, so now we're just going to solve this two-step equation like normal. So to get x by itself, I have to get rid of this plus 14. So the opposite of adding 14 is subtracting 14. We're not going to be left with 21x equals a negative 15. And then to get that x by itself, since 21 and x are multiplying, the opposite of multiplying is dividing. And then notice how, again, negative 15 divided by 21 does not go in evenly. However, it does reduce because 3 goes into both of them. So this fraction will reduce to negative 5 over 7. And that would be your answer. Okay, so now let's move on to decimals. So whenever you guys see decimals and you're like, man, I really don't like decimals, I want to get rid of them, well, there's a way that you can get rid of the decimals and change them into integers as well. So your first step is to look for the decimal with the most digits. So when they say the most digits is you're looking behind the decimals and you're seeing which one has the most. So as you guys can see, it was this 0.25x, okay, because it had 2 digits after the decimal point where these two only had 1. So once you find that decimal with the most digits, you're now going to multiply both sides of the equation by that power of 10. So you're going to look at how many digits it has, and then you're going to say to yourself what place value is that last digit in. So in this case, 2 is in the tenths place and 5 is in the hundredths place. So if it's in the hundredths place, that is the number that you're going to multiply by on both sides. So remember your place values. You have your tenths, hundredths, thousandths, and so on, okay, but these are probably the 3 that you'll stick to. So again, since the 5 was in the hundredths place, that's what you should be multiplying by on both sides. And then it just goes back to what we did on the front with fractions. You'll take this 100 and you'll do the distributive property. And then over here, you'll take that 100 times your 0.1. And then I would use your calculator for this because it'll be easier. And then notice how you get down to this equation once you got rid of those decimals. Okay? So let's try a couple. So again, I see some decimals and I'm like, I don't really like decimals. So your first step to get rid of them is to look for the decimal with the most digits. So I'm looking for the most digits after, and they're actually both the same. So that is totally fine. So now you're just going to say to yourself, okay, what place value are those numbers in? Well, it's only one number after the decimal point, so they are in the tenths place. Okay? So if they're in the tenths place, that's the number that you're going to multiply by on both sides of your equation. So I'm going to multiply by 10, multiply by 10. Okay, and then just go back to what we did on the front side with fractions. So you're going to take this 10 and multiply it times everything on the inside. So this will become 10 times 1.3, that will become 13. 10 times a negative 2d, that will become a negative 20d. And then 10 times a 2.7 would become 27. Okay, so notice how your decimals are now gone. Now you can just solve this like normal. So to get d by itself, I'm going to move this 13. Opposite of a positive 13 is a negative. So in other words, we're going to subtract. Notice how when I cross out the 13s, I still have this negative 20d, so that's what I'm going to bring down. And then 27 minus 13 is 14. And then our last step to get d by itself is to divide by that negative 20. And again, guys, if 14 divided by negative 20 does not go in evenly, just leave your answer as a fraction, just reduce it. So if I were to reduce this by 2, I would get negative 7/10. Alright, so let's try one more, then I'll have you guys try a couple. So again, first step, if you want to get rid of the decimals, is to look for the decimal with the most digits. And the one with the most digits is over here with that 28.65. And you have to look at what place value that last number is in, and notice how it's in the hundredths place. So since it's in the hundredths place, that is what you should multiply by on both sides. Okay, and now you just simplify. So you're going to do the distributive property. You're going to take that 100 times the 24.2, and that will become 2,420. 100 times your 5p will be 500p. And then your 28.65 times 100 is 2,865. All right, so now just solve your basic two-step equation now. So to get p by itself, I'm going to subtract this 2420 on both sides. And we're going to be left with 500p equals a 445. And then our last step is to divide by that 500 on both sides. And again, it will not go in evenly, so I just need to reduce it. And I believe if we reduce it by 5, that will be reduced all the way. So 89 over 100. Okay, so the next page is just some more examples. So you guys can go ahead and try these out on your own. I do want you guys to be careful with ones like these. So I'll do number 5 with you guys. And you guys can try these out on your own, and then I'll just show you guys all the answers so that you guys can check your work. And then if you guys have any questions, you can just email me, okay? So like for this one, again, your first thing that you need to do is find your least common multiple between, now it's 3 numbers, okay? So if you were to list all the factors of 2, all the factors of 3, and all the factors of 9, your least common multiple would be 18, okay? So if your least common multiple is 18, again, you can multiply by that 18 on both sides. And then you can just start simplifying it. So if you were to take your 18 times your x over 9, notice how you do have to cross reduce here, okay, because you're going to have an 18x over 9. So since 9 goes into both of them, you can just reduce that. So that will become a 1, and this 18 will become a 2 onto the x. So that would become 2x. Take your 18 times your 2x over 2. Again, you can cross reduce, so this 2 will now become a 1 in the denominator. And this, if you still have stuff in the numerator, you have to multiply those numbers together. So you're going to be left with an 18x. And then over here, when you cross reduce, 3 goes into 18 6 times. And take your 6 times your 1 that's left in the numerator, so then you're going to be left with 6. Okay, now notice that this is a multi-step equation because you have to simplify this side first. Notice how they are like terms. So you simplify it by just adding those two things together, so that will give you 20x. And then now it's just a basic one-step equation. So divide that 20 on both sides, and you should get x equals, and then 6 divided by 20 does not go in evenly, so just reduce it, and you should get 3/10. Okay? So just do some practice problems, okay? So go ahead and pause this video and try these out on your own. If you don't want to do what we are doing here with like getting rid of the fractions and getting rid of the decimals, you don't have to, but with problems like this, when you have like multiple x's in your numerator, you do need to get rid of those fractions first. Okay, so go ahead and pause the video and then press play when you're ready for the answers. Alright guys, so for number 1 and number 2, I did not get rid of the fractions, I just solved them like normal. So to get my x by itself, I just multiplied by the reciprocal on both sides, and I got negative 10 over 9. If you got rid of the fractions and then solved it, you should still get the same thing, okay? And then same thing with number 2, you should get 8 over 9. Number 3, this is one of those situations where you did have to get rid of the fractions first because of this 2x in the numerator and a denominator down there. So your least common multiple should have been 10. And then when you took that 10 times the 3 halves, you should have got 15. 10 times the 2x over 5, you should have got 4x. And then your 7/10 times 10 gave you 7. And then when you solved it, you should have got negative 2. Number 4, I kept the fractions in there and I just solved it like normal, and I got 16 over 5. So again, you guys can pause the video if you need to look at the steps. Number 5 we did together. Number 6, I kept all of my fractions and I just solved like normal. So the first thing that I noticed was that I could combine like terms by adding my 2/3 x and my 1/6 x to get a 5/6 x. And then I just solved my basic equation here to get 6. And then lastly, number 7, I kept my decimals, but again, you could get rid of them by multiplying by 1,000 on both sides because your larger decimals were in the thousandths place. But no matter what, you should have got negative 0.2 or negative 1/5. Alright, so if you have any questions, please let me know. There is one more side, and this will be your homework page, so please just look at Canvas to see what questions I'm having you guys do for homework. Thank you.